Um, yeah, I'll do that here. I need permission, request permission from uh, send request to host.
Yeah. And you record it as well, so afterwards you can download it on your computer, whatever, and you use it
Yeah,
in any way you want.
yeah,
Um, how is the family?
good. Oliver was here today, uh,
Really?
visiting. Yeah, and Sue's good. Um, we're both getting a little bit slower, and we don't have as many people living at Meliadora at the moment. There's been some big changes, so we're sort of doing more outside, but trying to sort of scale down the gardens a bit, and trying to sort of work out what the succession plan is.
Oh boy, if you say that, what should I say? Design and redesign all the time. That's what Joe always said.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm really glad that you give me the opportunity to talk with you as I would like to have this meeting in two parts. First, I have
yeah,
some private questions,
yeah,
things that really I struggle with, permaculture wise, and my personal affairs are a different story. But I wrote down some questions so I don't forget them. But personally, I could make quite a decent living from permaculture until today or last year, you can say. Yeah, not really great. Yeah, but I didn't
yeah,
promote it as well. Europe is a different part of the world. Farmers are not interested in permaculture here. Not at all, you can say.
yeah,
I, I presented at the Humus Days. This is a big event happening every year where like 500 farmers and humus building enthusiasts come together and they invite top speakers from German countries, but sometimes from some other countries as well, Terra Preta and humus building and compost making. And I talked there already 3 times, and it was the first time ever this year that a very young farmer said, "Oh, I was reading a book about keylining, and now I started in winter to implement some keyline strategies in my place." The first time ever. I mean, I did my keyline training with Darren Doherty
yeah,
20 years ago.
yeah,
And nobody ever asked for it. I offered it, was no interest. And I, with permaculture, training permaculture, I recognize trends very fast and early. I recognized that the promotion from Richard Perkins and Jeff Lawton changed. Same time I changed my strategy. But I spent the first time ever really big money on promoting permaculture courses, thousands of euros, not just a little bit of meta advertisement. I gave
yeah,
web seminars first time ever. I had no idea how Zoom worked.
yeah,
Look at my hands. I work outside, and I had to cancel all courses, even my best one, which was sold out for 6 years in a row now in
mm,
Germany, always at the same time, end of August. This is always was sold out. The promotion always went from the organizer and a little bit of me spreading the word. I had one course in India in March. Just yeah, that doesn't really pay the costs because I go there to share. It's like a
yeah,
knowledge transfer. And the
yeah,
other thing, and I had one course from a woman who's part of my team. We're like a 8 generations team trying to promote permaculture. And she wanted to have this course, and I had only 5 participants. I said, it doesn't matter. Let's go to France. Let's teach it. Let's
yeah,
share it. It was a great course. But all the other courses I had to cancel. And the services are not asked for, but agriculture services are asked for. And I'm really struggling. 2 years ago, I started practicing chiropractic. It's my new love to
yeah,
help people. It's
yeah,
like my intuition said, oh, you have to, you have to build another foundation, another pillar, support the function of making money by another element. And why is that?
So this turn down, how recent has it been?
Oh, it's this year. It's the
Yeah.
it it I recognized the change last year. We started promoting this Indian course like in October. I said, oh, let's try a web seminar and this kind of things. I'm slowly getting an online marketing expert, which I find hilarious. I have to sit in front of this computer hours and hours. Uh, my wife told me yesterday, you complain all the time about sitting in front of the computer. Stop it. Yeah, and I almost freaked out because but I have to find a solution for the problem we have.
Mm,
And I will not find it in a garden. I have to find it somewhere else.
mm.
Yeah. What is your future perspective? This is my first question that I have. I mean, 50 years
Yeah.
permaculture, it's not mainstream yet. I think you heard this question 100 times. I heard it 100 times, and I had my own answers to it. What's your perspective?
Yeah. Well, in terms of um, what's happened uh, for us is that since the huge flurry that followed COVID of huge interest in permaculture, which also coincided with a whole lot of government created and spent money and a sort of huge interest, there's been this sort of contraction, which seems to have been getting more and more. Um, and certainly the book business has been struggling badly. But that's also that books as a viable thing, like music, is becoming something that just doesn't work for authors and even publishers. So there's macro structural things happening that are affecting that. Relatively speaking, courses have held up reasonably well, but also we've gone into more online courses and online resources. And that's partly because we've sort of split the businesses that Oliver and Richard are running the book publishing and distribution, and Homegrown Design is focusing mainly in the education field because I've been doing less in the way of consultancy. And so we have a team of about, I think it's nearly 8 part-time people, all part-time, some of them just doing very small um, amounts, and have developed quite an online presence, both for us and for the book publishing business. Things like Google ads, Facebook ads, those things haven't worked. We've gone completely newsletter, internal control of our network. What's happened in parallel, um, uh, Nick and Kirsten, who were living here some years ago and then moved to Tassie with Milkwood Permaculture, the online course that I did with them, their sort of permaculture living course, which is based around the framework of the principles. They used that to go fully online and stop doing teaching. And they're very competent and energetic business people.
Yeah,
Oliver assessed,
Nick
he
came from this
thought,
perspective. Yeah.
yeah, that when he was looking when he was younger at all the permaculture businesses in Australia, he thought Milkwood was the only one that qualified as being a viable business. And he sort of was, Nick was a bit of a mentor to him in some sort of business things. But they went from 18 people they were employing, they're down to Nick and Kirsten and one part-time person.
Why is that? And what's the future? I mean, we are now after Corona. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had
Now,
better income during Corona teaching courses and having projects and getting the chance to build a garden, which I haven't had for a long time. And of course, I took the
Yeah.
opportunity. You get an offer to build a really beautiful, nice, edible garden,
Mm,
with a lot of craftsman skills, not just wicking some beds in and trees, really
mm,
welding and irrigation and beautiful corrugated iron pots and really the nicest garden I ever built, probably.
yeah.
But now it's like, where are we heading? Where are we heading?
Yeah.
We're going
Well,
complete global. Everything
yeah.
shall be like a world. We're heading towards, it's just my private opinion, uh, a world government
Mm,
on one side, yeah, complete centralized digital
mm,
currency for everybody, total recall. And on the other side, the only solution is decentralizing and
mm.
and strengthening the community. But this is
Yeah,
not,
well, I'll come to those things. Just a few
yeah,
other data points in the Australian context. I haven't talked to people like Morag Gamble or some of the other people, who have sort of got a pretty strong presence, but Ceres, which has been running PDCs for years, and all of our colleagues here in Central Victoria are the main teachers. Okay, that's an organisation with environmental education. It's got a lot of employees. It's got a lot of presence. They cancelled their PDC this year for the first time. And Very Edible Gardens, Adam Grubb and Dan Palmer, who died a couple of years
permaplate.
ago,
Yeah.
um, they cancelled their PDC as well. So we've still got several PDCs running in Central Victoria, and um, one of those that is run out of Castlemaine and started in the neighbourhood house and was supported by public money and was a really low cost budget course that Ian Lillington and Beck Lowe colleagues ran. In COVID, that got closed down because they weren't vaccinated and whatever. And they moved that course to private venue, Austin Anders' place, who's our IT person. And they developed that course, and it's interesting because it's a much more local course. They get mostly local Central Victorian people, and it's a real budget, low cost, no residential stuff, and that was continued to be quite successful. But then, as they possibly reached the limits of their local thing, they started doing more Google ads and stuff, and Aussie's really super capable in that whole end of things. And that didn't bring any results. So all the results that were being brought were word of mouth. So I think there's a couple of things happening. Uh, Firstly, I suppose going back, I always thought that when economic contraction really happened, would permaculture flourish
Mm.
because it's seen as sort of part of adaptive solutions, or would it be cast aside as part of the discretionary expenditure? And we go back to a sort of what I used to call a sort of a spuds, a beer and petrol economy. Like what are the most essential things for people?
Yep.
Um, so I always had that question, and it could be partly what's happening, or generally, is this just belt tightening, especially after the huge blow off of money which was created in COVID, that this contraction of circumstances, yeah, permaculture's been identified as, yeah, it'd be nice, but it's longer term thinking, or it's like it's not essential to my survival right now. So I think that's one factor that might be affecting it. I think there's um, another weird one, which is, I think, increasingly with the algorithmic logic, things are being divided into these separate self-referencing camps, and that permaculture actually fails in some ironic way by being seen as either too woke or not woke enough. So that, you know, this sort of divide that it's greenies carrying on about climate change and not dealing with really essential things, or it's a right-wing preppers who are, you know, and so that weird thing that it actually has common sense for people in these different worlds. And I saw that hopefully Earth Restorer's Guide to Permaculture and my Retro Suburbia from me and Ro Morrow would be like two beacons facing into different worlds. You know, mine more into actually the socially conservative, let's look after our patch, let's be more autonomous, and that Rosemary's big, you know, how are we going to save the world sort of view would appeal to those sort of people. And that, you know, because there is like everywhere, these sort of divides that are being increased by the sort of algorithmic thing. But then I think the last factor that I think we have to consider as realistic, or those of us who sort of understand what's happening of moving towards a digital surveillance and control state, that the use of what in the larger political sense is the most, in my understanding, the most extreme development of censorship through Facebook and everything, that maybe permaculture has finally been identified as looks like economic treason. You know, that rather than, you know, and that there's enough of its dependency on the network world, which permaculture's always been, had that ideology of localism and everything, but its reality in the world has been incredibly hyper network, which makes it then naturally into the internet and online things as a source of finding out something. So if that is being crushed invisibly, you know, that can sort of like is capable of it. It can just be like a little bit of turning down. That means then, yes, people still connect through, oh yeah, I went to this course and it was really good, and that says to someone else, and that type of really slow, small stuff. But the network stuff that we all rely on to connect to people with like-minded interests, it is actually being suppressed. And there's one sort of last factor that may be operating, that huge numbers of people like us who are saying, fuck being online, fuck my smartphone, I want to be in nature, I want to be directly with people. And so they're actually disconnecting. And so they're actually back to whatever their circle of local geographic and family sort of connection is, which is in some ways good. But if it doesn't include any people who are connected to what we're doing, then what we're doing doesn't get into that. You know, because people are just going back, you know, and it's obviously a smaller proportion of people, but they're some of the very people we want to connect to. Now, I don't know, you know, so they're all seem to me big macro things that are going on that could be part of, you know, this downturn, and it does seem to have been quite sharp. And yeah, we don't know. Like certainly our book business is now in some sort of wind down, rather than it can't take on new projects. That reprinting Retro Suburbia and then printing Rosemary Morrow's Earth Users Guide to Permaculture and it not really taking off at all in the US. And
Is
you
it,
know, so we are sort of like winding down some of those things rather than just having sort of vast stocks of books. Um, the yeah, I suppose the last thing would be branding of things under labels. Um, Labels branding accumulates a sort of collateral damage or skeletons in the cupboard or tiredness. And there's always that argument that there's this attraction to novelty or the new framework or the new expression. So I've always been open to that possibility, despite me thinking permaculture is still the best framework to describe what we're talking about. That some people strategically will go, like Darren Doherty did, nah, that's got too much negativity associated with it. I mean, for him, it was partly a reaction to what he saw in socially conservative regenerative ag circles in the United States, reacting, he thought, to some of Jeff Lawton's work and whatever. So, you know, he sort of went off and said, oh, you know, developed his own framework. And I've seen people do that in various ways, but I've also seen how permaculture, certainly in the context here, but also internationally, there's still a lot of goodwill around it. You know, that
what do you mean with goodwill from of whom?
well, that people at different levels recognizing, oh, yes, that's a positive thing.
Hmm.
So I'll give you two examples. I mean, one is, you know, the work that Rosemary Morrow's done in, you know, in refugee camps and different places around the world and working with UN agencies and whatever, and getting the stamp on the book of the UN development goals could be sort of seen as reflecting a sort of view amongst some of those, that sort of circle, that permaculture is a good thing. At the other extreme, when COVID was happening and we joined the big marches against the lockdowns in Australia, which led to me being castigated on Facebook. I don't know whether you heard about that, for marching with Nazis. One of the things Sue and I
Oh,
did.
I was booked for courses in Germany, and then I went to a demonstration in Vienna, and
Right.
then they said, we get funding from local government, and you've been to the demonstrations, and we're afraid to lose the fundings because there have been some right-wing people there and Nazis, and I said, what are you talking about? You know me for decades now. I'm walking beside a grandma and her grandchild with
Yeah.
50,000 people. You think suddenly out of nothing we have 50,000 Nazis in Austria? I mean, that's hilarious. Yeah, but. Uh, yeah, you
Same
laughing.
thing.
I don't find it funny, you know.
No, I'm not. I'm not laughing. Not funny. It's yeah. So, but what I was saying is that Sue and I went down and took retro suburbia bookmarks and handed them out to people. And in handing out, she handed out 150 in this gigantic demonstration. I handed out about 150. She had two people say, no, thank you. I had one. And so many people said, oh, yeah, permaculture, something positive. You know, now, so there, and I would characterize a lot of those people as being working class, battlers, ordinary Australians. And okay, permaculture has a much higher profile for all sorts of, you know, historic reasons in Australia. But I think there is still a lot of that goodwill, but I think we are in a situation that I suggested in my essay that I wrote in 2013. It's over 10 years ago now. Crash on Demand, Welcome to the Brown Tech Future. That in what we are in the world is most closely to what I wrote about in the brown tech scenario. And the structural characteristic of it was that as crises get more intense, whether they are driven by climate change or peak oil or anything else, they throw this stress back on governments that they're the government and they need to do something, that they're responsible. And so in that crisis, they don't really have the capacity under a free market ideology. They've lost the capacity to command the economy. So they rely on the corporations to do that. So this synergy of tighter relationship, public-private relationships is, of course, structurally fascism. But of course, that term is very loaded. But in that world, what happens is the internal systems start to develop a deep schizophrenia in terms of wanting to do one thing, for people to do one thing and wanting to do the opposite. So, for example, health system in crisis. There's too many people needing too many services. If people went off and looked after themselves, that would be good for reduced stress on the system. But on the other hand, you need this big special diagnostic machine that needs X numbers of people through it in the hospital every week for the bean counters to justify it. So you need more patients. So there's these different forces like saying, come into the system and we will look after you. You might have to climb into a tighter straitjacket. Or another force saying, fuck off and go and look after yourself, where you have freedom, but you are exposed. And so this, what COVID, I think, represented was this like decision coming towards people. And it was a classic example of what I was talking about. You're either in the system or you're out of it type of thing. And so that ability to go, say, in relation to health or something like childbirth, oh yeah, we want to have a baby at home, but we want that hospital system to be there as a backup. And increasingly in some countries, including Australia, no, you're like, no midwife support services, no nothing. You're out on your own, or you're in this system where you do what you're told. And I think that then creates a difficulty where people, as those decisions come towards them under crisis, someone chooses that route and someone chooses another route. And a lot of that is just chance or, you know, how they were feeling or what their family said or whatever. And then they find themselves like on a separate gulf from people who they were really close to. And how do you maintain that, you know, contact across those divides at the same time as find new solidarity, especially for those who are on the outside? How do you find new connections that you didn't have before? I mean, I've been raving on for ages, and maybe you're familiar with these ideas that I've expressed.
I'm very much familiar. But for me, that's almost too much in detail. Because you're looking at a big picture, you don't really have a chance to change. So you have to go through a lot of resistance if you want to change your daily common worker employment life, because we are the whole surrounding of you and all the structures around you, socially, economically, are just pushing you in one direction. And if you want to get out of this system, it gets really, really hard. It's not so easy. we have a governance not of governments, we have a governance of corporations and banks who are in charge of the money that the
Mm.
where governments agree to, okay, you are in charge with the money and we do what you say because we have to. I mean, it does not
Yeah.
matter what kind of government you get. They always
Mm.
rely on the money which is printed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you cannot get out. There are supercomputers, and an elite. This is my personal perspective, who is say, okay, where do we go now? Okay, what's our next decision? And we can just follow this game, this monopoly which is played, and we're in the last two rounds. And then every time it's always, oh, you get, a crisis, you get some money back. We continue the game, yeah, and you never get out of the game because you only get a little bit of money. It always goes in the same direction. I never
Well,
found a better tool for myself to go the opposite way than permaculture, and that's why it was so shocked. I was really shocked when you told me it's the same happening in Australia. I mean,
yeah.
the motherland of permaculture. So
Yeah.
I get goosebumps, to be honest. I have some
Yeah.
goosebumps, and whew, yeah,
Yeah. I
I
think we are subject to a lot of, global forces. There's no doubt about that. In terms of the larger picture, I think I see the time we're in is, although obviously the technology is completely different and the degree of enclosure that's possible of people is much greater, but there's a process happening. There's like happened in Rome as the empire got more and more dysfunctional, that eventually being a Roman citizen, the best thing in the ancient world, the most privileged thing to be a Roman citizen, became such a burden that people bailed out of being Romans and basically became barbarians. You know, that and I think the ways in which people become barbarians, of course, that became a loaded term to describe certain people. But um, I look at a lot of people, um, partly within systems, doing workarounds. So, for example, friends of ours who lost their jobs, who were in the health and disabilities area, who worked with really severely difficult and disadvantaged people that they were the carers for, being pleaded to come back and their boss saying, just get a fake certificate, so that preparedness also, as the trust in the righteousness of the rules of the system, that the number of people who actually believe in that um, decreases, and the sense of corruption at the top, people being prepared to break rules, turn a blind eye, operate in other ways under the radar. So, like in Australia, for example, with building in rural areas, it's now much better to buy an existing house, no matter how crappy, because you can fiddle around and retrofit it without going through all the red tape. Whereas to actually build a place according to the rules is just mind-boggling in how restrictive it is. So I think those pathways are very difficult, but in retro suburbia, I suggested a hybrid between a political strategy. I didn't outline this in the book in great detail, but I said that why is it in my presentations often, funded by councils, where I would tell people when people said, what am I allowed to do? And I would say, don't worry about the legal license too much. Make sure you have the social license, like from neighbours and
this
whatever.
this is the most
Yeah, and in saying those things, I thought sometimes people asking me these questions seemed so timid and so cautious about, whether they could build a compost toilet in their back shed, without getting permission from the council. And I thought, I looked at the people and thought, they look like they would join an XR rebellion demonstration and lockdown in the city. And I thought, why would people be so radical in that sense and so cautious at home? And the conclusion I came to is the sense of solidarity of working in a large group. Whereas at home, people often feel incredibly isolated. So what I saw as one of the strategies, if retro suburbia and ideas like that could get going, is that it's based on people doing what they want to do rather than trying to force society to do something. And therefore, it's less controversial and confronting to ordinary conservative people. Oh, they just want to build a bucket to shit in their house. Okay, well, if they want to do that, they're not forcing me to do that. Whereas the XR rebellion is sort of like trying to stop society doing what it's doing. So what I saw is that a lot of these things, if we looked at these in terms of not their necessarily popularity, but their acceptance in a wider population, that there's quite a sense of being able to not at least antagonize people, even if the system above sees what is being done as actually subversive and a real threat. So then if you have people who would see that enlightened self-interest by people, permaculture strategies, was actually really important, rather than the traditional, especially left activism, where you've got to sacrifice yourself for the cause. If you get any benefit from something under that left radical paradigm, that's suspicious. You can't actually benefit from what you're doing. If you could turn that around and say, look, we should help and support people doing stuff, then the authorities you're actually fighting against are often like local government or small things. And that's actually got a much better chance of bringing solidarity to support and defend those actions against authority just squashing, isolated people. But trying to convey that sort of political strategy of change where people feel less timid and more prepared to say, I'm going to do this because it's actually in my interests to do that. And I'm going to develop as much as I can the non-monetary economy, which is, of course, economic treason because it reduces GDP. So, like in some senses, we've gone some way in that, and it's only our, commitment to trying to get ideas out there in the world that maybe at our age, I'd just say, well, I just, retire or whatever. And I know that's not, it's different for people at different stages.
I always say I retired 10 years ago. I only do what I go ahead and just do what I want. When I turned 50, I said I retire now. And I worked more than before, but my inner attitude changed. No, it's not about retirement. It's not about these local things for where I struggle at the moment. I know all these solutions. I talk about them since almost 20 years. Yeah. I share and I take every argument apart and I put it together logically, and I don't know any better tool to do that than permaculture. Permaculture restructured my brain in a way that I can see very clearly where we were heading now, or the opportunities. And Corona was the absolute eye-opener. That was for me the absolute eye-opener, because suddenly everything was like, you take the curtain away and everything got exposed very clearly. And I interviewed a very renowned economist, alternative economist from the university. And I did hear him say, I don't know why that's happening, this Corona thing, because they already have us in the pocket. You know, you're so under control and surveillance, you cannot. It's not the Roman Empire more or the French Revolution where you just go and you kill some people. This became impossible. You're under complete surveillance and control. The force against you, yeah, or the possibilities to keep people in charge is completely unlimited. You can have
Mm.
a handful of people keeping 100,000 peoples in place with the right gear. So it's not like you can take something and change the system with force. This is absolutely
Mm.
impossible. And I don't know. Man, talking with you make my future perspective more clear, the path that I will go, and I'm a little bit disappointed because it means I will not promote my permaculture path so much. I will go in my new love, uh, treating people with my yoga education, with my pain treatment, with my fascial treatment, with my chiropractic. But this is not what my pure love is sharing this amazing knowledge and insight, this design science where it's really we struggle so at the moment. When you want to sell something online, you have to put your product in one sentence. You have to explain it in one sentence. Try that with permaculture. It's absolute impossible. For 20 years, I was working on my explanation for permaculture. It changed 1,000 times. And finally, I adapt my explanation to the person I sit in front.
Yeah.
So if it's David Holmgren, I would completely, he knows he wrote the whole thing. So I would explain it like a student to his teacher. But if I talk to somebody who has a business or a farmer, it's a complete different approach explaining it because
Yeah.
there's so many ways to go. I just had a talk yesterday with an online promoter making these video clips because they say, yeah, you make a video clip and your income of the company, whatever, will be boosted. And there are all the examples, you know how this thing works. And I
Mm.
talked with him, and afterwards he said, sorry, we cannot do it. Permaculture is so complex, we cannot put that in a movie. We only can put something in a small clip, which is self-explaining in a few words, like, okay, selling selling a knife or a service or whatever. Something which is very, very compacted and one single
Mm.
item, you can say. Um, and that made me think. And this afternoon, I give a permaculture presentation for the Indian market. We canceled the course, that's for sure, but I promised to do this presentation, so I will do this presentation.
Yeah.
And I completely changed the presentation to a modern web seminar thing. It's not, I started giving web seminars just information, like a lecture in
Mm.
February. And then you study how web seminars work if you want to sell something. It's a complete
Mm.
different approach. It's an NLP approach. This is what it is. Nothing else. You are positive. You just yourself feeling because I say that in my courses since 10 years. When you explain, when you go home from the course and people will ask you what's permaculture, the information is not so important. Your excitement is important. If you're
Mm.
excited, they get interested. If you say permaculture is living within the borders of the carrying capacity, yeah, and a nice lifestyle with animals and plants, perennials, blah, 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 they will not follow you. But if you say, wow, that's so cool, you have to have a look. They say, okay, then everybody gets curious.
Mm.
And I cannot transmit this message anymore. So I really struggled. I really struggled,
Mm.
and I'm happy that I'm unhappy that you told me that people in Australia struggle as well. But it's like a global thing. It's not just something in
Mm.
Europe. Yeah, there's more and
No.
more people want to go per the permaculture way. More and more students making workshops and this kind of things. And it's this is not the best news that I have for them now. If they
Yeah.
ask
Look,
me what to do.
it's it's hard to know, and there's still sort of, a lot of interest that comes back to us from various people involved in permaculture education and design and applications outside and beyond, um, the fields that it has been, like especially we've found recently in France, there appears to be like quite a strong interest in permaculture and it coming from different levels, really abstract, very French philosophical sort of levels, right down to sort of practical levels. But I'm also wondering how much the digital censorship, which in some ways seems to be stronger in Europe perhaps than elsewhere, that there's a sort of sense of things coming out of the EU frameworks and regulatory frameworks, which may be, you know, this algorithmic switch off of permaculture as being classified as, you know, misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation, these new bizarre categories of unacceptability that, you know, I'm not sure, you know, how much of that factor compared with all of these
To be
other ones
honest,
are at work.
I'm allowed to add something. I don't have the impression we are big enough in Europe that we are important for an algorithm.
Yeah, look,
They more go for for what's this censorship and algorithm more goes in a direction of who has the loudest voice now. Yeah, the people who glue them, Fridays for Future, or people gluing them on the roads at the moment. Yeah, everything that's popping up somewhere, bang, yeah, immediately. You can immediately see how a force is lifting it up if they wanted to, or is suppressing it. And
yeah,
permaculture is so not in the mainstream that I don't have the impression at all in Europe.
I
I've been in
I
France. I just
understand.
taught a course in France, and the winemakers and the farmers I talked to, they struggle heavily. I've been in Portugal. I've been in Spain. They're dying. This agriculture is
Mm,
complete dying. But permaculture is not in any discussion about having the solutions for the whole thing. They take one thing out. Yeah, they take syntropic agriculture. No, we do silvopasture now, or we do whatever.
yeah,
But it's only one thing. But not seeing this amazing potential, having this tool fitting all this together. I mean, the best book about it, new book about it from my point of view, is Mark Shepard, Restoration Agriculture.
oh
He
yeah,
brings it to the point.
yeah,
For every farmer, this is the future. This is the only
mm,
future.
mm,
Yeah. Trees, passive irrigation, building humus.
yeah,
That's it. Perennials, tree crops, perennials, and passive irrigation with key linings,
mm,
whatever fits at your property. And he has all the figures in there in the book. I don't know if you
yeah, yeah.
had a look at it. It's
It's a
just
great
it's an eye
it's a
opener.
great book.
Even for me, it was an eye opener.
Yeah, look, I think um, although the gross actions of the censorship and the algorithm are sort of clearer now to a lot of people. My understanding is a lot of these things were sort of designed in like to Google from the beginning. You know, that Google, my understanding is Google actually came out of very strongly CIA
Mm,
connected
mm,
things, and that the ability to operate at the subtle level um, without it being so noticeable and the logistical capacity to actually be working on lots and lots of little things like tiny things like permaculture is also in relation to how desperate the system is to try and maintain hegemonic control of losing the control of the narrative. So that I think these new tools are possibly being used all sorts of places against things that might possibly be emergent problems from that top-down system point of view. I agree with you completely that, you know, permaculture is not really sort of up there in all sort of threats to, you know, but there's all these counterintuitive things happening. Like we've just had the translation of Earth Restorer's Guide to Permaculture in Chinese. And I thought with Rosemary's Morrow's connections in Taiwan and there being quite an established permaculture network in Taiwan, the possibility that in China, permaculture could be seen by the Communist Party as woke Western subversion, you know, and yet the thing's just been published there, and there's this glowing report, this amazing article in the Shanghai Times, which is very strongly connected to the Communist Party, you know, and there's all these case studies of Chinese permaculture places that are being added to the book. And I thought, oh, well, you know, so there's things like that that are, oh, that's like looks like an open door to some, you know, actually greater possibilities. Now, it could be an example of me clutching at straws, so to speak, you know, amongst all these other things of not having an effect. Um, but yeah, but overall, yeah, I am, after hearing from you, I'm interested to sort of ask more widely with people to certainly to see whether that downturn is more broad. I mean, I think the context of what's happening in the world is there's savage sort of disconnection between things of how people are sort of focused on so many things, from crises, health crises, personal health crises within families, through to the greatest chance of nuclear annihilation greater than the Cuban Missile Crisis, you know, as well as, of course, all the endless climate angst and stuff, and the financial, you know, instabilities, and a general sense of sort of madness that's sort of leading people to just try and keep their heads down and look at exactly what's in front of them. But saying that, like health, like one of the things that for me came out of COVID is that after a lifetime focusing on food and energy and fundamental needs, it became pretty clear that health was, people are really, really vulnerable to stories and threats about health, real and imagined, you know, and that, you know, it's no accident that the chapter in Retro Suburbia on health, disability and aging was the last one I wrote, because it's like quite difficult subject and it's not my area. But also just recently, the interview I had with the forgotten her name from Germany, who's the holistic doctor who came out and did our course.
Morgana.
Yeah,
We talk at
Morgana.
the same we talk at the same congress. I was the second one she interviewed.
Yeah, well, it was funny because she sent me the links and everything, and I looked at the conference and I thought, oh, I recognize some of those names. And oh, Christoph Schneider. Yeah, so, but you know what? I was saying that, and then Sue on her phone got something about Christoph Schneider come up on her phone. So I don't have a phone, you know, but these devices.
I don't want to have him vote. You're so privileged. I have a very private last question.
Yeah.
You and Sue, because it's just mentioned here, your partner in life and livelihood. I couple for decades now. I think 4 decades,
Yeah,
five, 4 or 5 decades.
yeah,
Please
since
advise me or
82.
us how to select the right person as a spouse, living a permaculture sound lifestyle, and how to make it work. You as my
Yeah.
permaculture eldest, you can say, yeah, you're the top of the pyramid. Wait, how to make that work? How did you make that work?
Well, I think it was partly by having different domains of expertise, but having common values and uh, preparedness to do things uh, away from society's carrots and sticks, to actually sort of chart our own path that we worked out together. But I think there's definitely been an element uh, of being a dance of who is leading in different areas of responsibility or passion or ability. But I don't know. Like some of it says to me, it's just a fortunate accident. Like, that, you know, neither of us had any trust in the institution of marriage. And it seemed to me an absurd idea that people would make this statement about how they'll be together for their whole lives when the stats, especially amongst the sort of people who we were so appalling about
Mm.
survival of relationships. So, in a sense, it's sort of having low expectations in that regard and yet being committed to being prepared to compromise in things that are like compromise of ways of being and doing things that are intensely held for yourself, but you need to compromise, but accepting that in the larger picture, there still is, common goals. So, for example, between myself and Sue, I've always been the sort of evidence-based person and, rational, and she's always been intuitive and anti-science and skeptical about everything.
Sounds
And
like
that,
my wife.
well, I think that just accepting different ways of seeing the world um, has been uh, a big part of it. Um, the different ways of thinking and recognizing that those can be uh, complementary.
It's absolutely enriching my life. Absolutely. It's the best way to grow. Somebody having another opinion
Yeah,
or better intuition, like my wife. Well, my wife has much better intuition. I have to have it here, and she
yeah,
has it here and in her guts.
yep,
And in most,
yep,
in a lot of areas, I know she's right. Even so, I see differently. I know, okay, in a week we will
yep,
see she's probably right.
yep.
Thank you so
Yeah, well,
much.
that's what I've found, that humility, especially those of us who've got big and overactive brains, to sort of have that humility to not need to use logic to um, batter the other person into a corner. Certainly with characters like Sue Dennett, who is a natural Capricorn,
Mm,
using the astrological, that there's no point saying, look, you need to do this or you need to accept this, because she will be automatically rejected.
mm.
You must let her come to her own way of seeing that or not seeing it, and then accept that. And that took me quite a while to
How
not
long?
attempt to use
How long?
uh well, I reckon it's still been occasionally I I think when I started to see Oliver doing it, to to her. You know, that I realized that, oh, he got that from me. Uh, and I think I pretty much cured myself
Okay.
of that. Um, so the passing on of trays, both good and bad. Seeing your offspring and going, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember my sons growing up doing the same. When you hear yourself in your son, it's like body language, they change the sound and it, David, thank you so much for your
uh,
time. Highly
oh, it's
appreciate it. I I got so many insights for myself, and I hope for the people listening to the interview, they they get the same inspiration out of it as I do.
yeah,
Please send my love to Sue. I was
will
watching your
will do.
videos, and I find it reminds me when she was standing in the kitchen explaining me things. I really loved it, and of course Oliver. I haven't talked and seen him for ages now, and
Yeah.
I think he was tw in his tw 20 or something when he visited my farm here in Austria.
Oh, well, check out his videos on YouTube, the Fryers Forest Research and Development, the
I will.
his Obtanium Engineering
Yeah, I saw some of
project.
his videos with the
Oh,
car
yeah.
rebuilding and so on, you know.
Yeah.
The algorithm had me and he sent me the videos, no? Yeah, I use it already. You know, I click sometimes on videos. I know, okay, now I get them. Now I get more.
Yeah.
They already ask you, you want to see more? They,
Yes.
they don't accept it when you say, no, I don't want to see more. That's they
Yeah.
don't accept. But if you want to see more, you will see more. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Another
Okay.
vehicle, electricity.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
well,
much. And all the
well,
best for you as well. A
no,
lot
thank
more years spreading the word, inspiring people like me. I mean, permaculture changed my life for 20 years. I'm on this path now, on this track, teaching for
yeah,
16 years now.
yeah.
What, how you find a good permaculture consultant, or how you see somebody as a good permaculture consultant or a teacher? You have one recommendation to the people watching, where to
Will
go?
do. Yeah, will do. Oh, it's great to uh, connect and yeah, whatever path you take, even in the health area, of course, it's the same principles that you are in some way applying in a different context.
It helps so much.
Yeah,
It helps so much from designing my homepage to whatever. You take a zoning or whatever you take from the permaculture tools, you can make use of them. Like
yeah,
like you take the principles and put it over a composting toilet and you have all 12 of them in there. I mean, this is the mindset that you have to develop, the understanding that you have to develop. I think
mm,
this is what we're sharing as teachers, the understanding how to put the things together with a
mm,
ethical sound, yeah, connecting to the ethics, staying to the ethics, but telling people you have to look over the borders and connect the things again. It's not this and this and this, it's how they work together. And I haven't found any
yeah,
better tool than permaculture,
yeah.
and it will be part of my life forever. So I thank you for bringing it into this world,
Oh,
helping
well,
to make this baby grow. I'm a big baby now, yeah, but I'm still grateful. And it gave me a living for a long period of time. Yeah.
yeah,
Joy, satisfaction, and I could make a living. I mean, what else you want?
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I have one more request. You know, Morgana probably asked you as well, having a little bit
Yep,
of hello, I'm David Holmgren and this kind of
yep,
thing. I just want to change the up. Would you say something, please?
yeah.
Yeah. And you just introduce yourself because now the picture is always changing to the one who's talking, and then I just cut it together.
Yeah.
Please.
Hello, I'm David Holmgren, the co-originator of the permaculture concept. And it's great to be talking to you from Meliadora in Australia.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I would love to go on talking. I don't know why, because it's always, I still remember, I wrote it in the email. I still remember when you took me aside, sitting in it, when we worked in the garden, when I asked the right question, and I was a permaculture baby 17 years ago, and you explained things to me like Joe never did, you know, which were just working our butt off on the farm. And I started to understand the complexity of permaculture, uh, and the whole world started to arise inside of me. It
Oh,
was still a
wow.
long learning path, but and
Mm.
I have the same feeling again. It's like it's so helpful. I don't have a lot of people that I can talk to about the permaculture topic
Mm.
on a certain level. So I really appreciate your
Yeah.
time,
Oh, well,
inspiring me again, and
stay in contact and
I would love
yeah,
to. I
yeah,
keep you informed where I'm heading next year.
yeah, that'd be good.
Thank you so much. All the
See ya.
best. See you.
You too.